Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guests are the investigative journalists behind the new book, All the President's Women, a searing account of President Trump's marriages, affairs, flings, and of course, the abundance of women who have accused the president of sexual misconduct, amongst other worse things. Please welcome the authors of All the President's Women, Barry Levine and Monique El-Faizy. Let's hear it. Hi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on the book. Let's start off with the big news coming from this book, which is that I believe it's 43 new accusations that you came across in your reporting, in your investigating, in your research. How did that happen, and were you surprised to find that out?
Sure. Well, the investigative process for me began in the spring of 2018 when the Stormy Daniels allegations were coming out. And I really thought, having covered this stuff all the way back to Monica Lewinsky, that there had to be a lot more there. And that's when the idea for the book came together. And I found Monique. I was extremely lucky to find her available to help me, a woman's perspective to collaborate with. I put together a small team of other journalists, Lucy Osborne and Whitney Clegg, and really the four of us went out down different paths and began investigating. And what was most surprising is that there were a lot of women who I believe are under non-disclosure agreements with President Trump that cannot speak. But in fact, we found about a dozen women who were willing to tell their stories for the first time of inappropriate behavior.
I think we think this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think there are a lot more women out there that weren't able to speak with us or who don't want to.
What did you find was the most common pattern of his predation?
There are a few patterns that emerged. So he seems to like young women on the younger side, especially, in the 90s. That was sort of his thing. That we found, allegedly. He also, the things that you hear about with the women that have come forward, pushing women against a wall and kissing them, groping, grabbing them exactly where he said he likes to grab them. We found a woman who said he did exactly that to her. So these patterns really do hold true throughout the decades. Porn stars.
Right.
He likes a porn star.
Is there a part, there's this feeling, at least that I have, that all of this stuff has been happening in this country for generations, right? The patriarchal system has been a huge part of all systems of the world, basically. But in America, especially with Trump, him becoming president has shocked and alarmed so many people that it has somehow awoken them to not just economic inequalities across the country and problems with our institutions, corruption with our institutions, but misogyny in a strange way. They sort of see this as like, okay, sure, my brother could have been like that and it would be annoying, or my boss, but the president can't be like this. So now nobody else in this country should be like this either, because it leads to that. Have you found that as well? Was that something that inspired you, interested you in writing this book?
I think that the thing that the presidency has illuminated, not just for me, but for a lot of women, is a friend of mine said this to me after Kavanaugh was confirmed. We thought we'd made all these gains as women since the 60s in terms of, we haven't reached parity, but in terms of pay equality and things like that. And then when Kavanaugh happened, Christine Blasey Ford came forward, and she was credible, and a lot of people believed her, and her testimony was incredibly moving to women, but also to men, and she was confirmed anyway. And a friend of mine said to me, that moment was the moment that we saw that the patriarchy is alive and well, and these gains have been surface gains, but the system hasn't changed.
The patriarchy is alive and well, and also that it profits from, not economically, I'm sure economically profits from as well, but convincing a large swath of women that they benefit from the patriarchy as well, and that, they don't have to believe women as well, I think.
Barry, I think his investigation found that women were part of a lot of this.
Well, I go back to the allegations that first came up in 2016 during the election. I really think that the mainstream media, for the most part, really did not give those women their say, their proper say, because all those allegations kind of came up together. And I think because of Trump's personality, somehow he was excused because his mode is to attack, is to call all the women liars, which he did. He learned that through the mentorship of Roy Cohen, who was his attorney back in the old days. And it troubled me going back then at the time of the election that there were other allegations that we since learned had been hushed up. That's why I really think it was important now to go back and, tell accurately what is really out there. And it is so, the instances of alleged predatory behavior that we have found is staggering to me. I had no idea when we began this research that we would go back and find so many incidents that, women were able to come forward and talk to us. There was one woman in particular, Karen Johnson, who had made an allegation that she had been attacked by him and groped by him at Mar-a-Lago when he was dating Melania, who was not in the room. This was during a New Year's Eve party, but was upstairs. It took her 2 months of talking with her before she even felt comfortable to, put her allegations on the record.
Of course, he's the president of the United States. He has all arms of power.
But what I'm saying is, because even though it's been so many decades since this happened, this woman is still so afraid of what happened. And when I asked her why she didn't come forward earlier, she said, well, I had once been a dancer in the old days. And so I thought that if I told my story, people would call me a liar. And we found out in talking to other women that, there is no, what you could say, you talk about Blasey Ford, but there's no perfect victim. Mm-hmm. And it's just so upsetting to me that so many women who do have stories feel that they can't come forward because they're going to be ridiculed, they're going to be attacked on social media, that Donald Trump is going to come out and call them, a liar 10 times over. So.
And they're right. That is what happens.
All these women are courageous for having come forward.
That's what happened with Christine Blasey Ford.
Happens to every single one of them.
Yeah. What made you want to join Barry in writing this book?
Well, as I say in the introduction, I initially didn't, right? The idea of immersing myself in these stories was not particularly appealing, but I had been thinking over the years about the idea of complicity, and and looking at the way we in the media handled previous presidents and allegations, and I came to the conclusion that not to do it would be to be complicit, and that when the opportunity came to me to sort of confront these stories and make them public, I had to do that I had a responsibility to do that.
Now, the book is, I will say, it's not just about these stories.
Yes.
It really tracks Donald Trump back to his childhood and relationship with his father and his mother in an effort to, I think, paint a picture of how a predator is groomed or raised.
Yeah.
When did you sort of come across the idea to do that, and what interested you in doing that? Because I imagine you could just sell the book off of being like, here are 43 chapters, and each chapter is an accusation.
Well, there's no question that when Monique got involved in the project, that she made me realize this was a much larger picture, that it wasn't just, as a journalist who has specialized in this type of reporting, I was very much into the numbers and the incidents and what untold stories there had been. Monique came and got involved in this project. She made me realize that there's a much larger picture. How does this relate? How do we connect the dots? And what does it all mean in terms of Donald Trump's predatory behavior, and also where it came from? And we went back to, I had a reporter who worked with me. We spent a lot of time digging into interviews with former classmates when he was in the military academy, when he was a teenager. And we found stories about how his father would bring women, model-type women, on weekends to the military academy, much older women, not the type of women who would be seen with military academy cadets. And his father, pushed these women onto Donald Trump for the most part. And you began seeing a process developing here about his relationships with women and what went on in his household. It all goes back to his childhood, to that upbringing, the mentorship of his father, and also, as I said, Roy Cohen.
I just think that I'm always baffled by the history of this man and who he is and how every rumor about like wealth and disgusting elite members of society, he kind of falls into that pattern, yet attacks others for being a part of it. Just as a side note, there's a picture of Fred Trump in the book that is a very hilarious photo where it looks like he has fake hair and fake eyebrows. And the book is worth purchasing just for that photo alone, to be perfectly honest.
Those are some serious eyebrows.
Well,
Yeah, serious eyebrows.
It may be the photo that shows him with Marla Maples on,
Yes.
on their wedding day. And what was interesting, the reason why I chose that photo, because I wanted to have a photo of him with his mother and father. He's looking directly at Marla Maples in the picture, and his mother and father are kind of looking off into oblivion that they were, that they were there. But what's interesting is that during that period of time, he had been cheating on his wife, Ivana Trump, with Marla Maples. And his mother said to Ivana, what type of son have I created?
Right.
His mother was just appalled at, his behavior.
One, his father said, you can have as many mistresses as you want, just don't get caught.
Right.
And don't just have one, right?
Mistresses, yes.
Yeah, don't just have as many
Right,
mistresses as you want,
right.
but never just have one, essentially, is what he said. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, he had a reputation for being a bit of a Lothario also. So I think he meant exactly what he said. Don't get involved, don't, keep your family intact, but do whatever you want to do on the side.
One of the things that you talk about in the book is how a predator views women as objects, or views their prey as simply as objects, and how that relates to shaping policy. I would take that a step further, and do you think that that is how he views essentially anyone who doesn't support him, or even his supporters, anybody outside of himself, women or not?
Yes, I don't think that's unique to women in his view. I think I don't know the man, right? But it seems to me that he has a mindset in which people around him are there for his pleasure, for his use.
Do you feel like in some ways you weren't just painting the picture of a predator, but just sort of an American sociopath?
Yeah, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I'm not going to diagnose him, but certainly, we interviewed psychiatrists, right? And,
yes, exactly.
And certainly, there are the hallmarks of narcissism, of, any number of diagnoses. But yeah, he does not, this is not the behavior of somebody who functions and interacts with other human beings in a healthy manner. And actually in the book we talk about why that may have been, the separation from his mother at a young age. We do try and look at that because he doesn't seem to have human engagements and warm engagements with people. He seems to really be transactional in the way he deals with people.
And it's not just a generational thing. There are some generational attitudes, but you interview other cadets at the academy who say, I, like Trump, learned about women via Playboy, but when I became a man, I realized that women were people and they weren't just nude photos in a magazine.
Well, that's correct. One of his biographers had told me, David K. Johnston said, going back to that period of time, while everybody else moved beyond that, Donald Trump has been living the year he was 13 for the last 60 years. And he's never really grown from that.
Well, he's never had to,
in
right?
his mindset. And of course, with women, we have seen him take advantage of women. I'm not talking about the predatory behavior, which we chronicle over the course of the decades. I'm just talking about his relationships with women, the marriages, where when each of his wives, I'm talking about Ivana, Marla, and Melania, were pregnant, he was engaging in extramarital affairs and had things on the side.
Didn't really believe in anything.
No, did not believe in anything. And to some degree, when you talked about patterns earlier, you see that when the cheating, in fact, increased when his wives were all pregnant, right, which is interesting.
Or disgusting and like obvious in a way, and stems from a complete lack of respect for the person that you've chosen to be your partner in life.
But again, as Monique will tell you, it all goes back to his childhood in terms of how his father viewed the pregnancies in their own household.
They weren't allowed to, in his house, the word pregnant was banned. Nobody was allowed to use the word pregnant. This is a woman who had 4 children.
Yeah.
Why was it banned?
I don't know. I mean, we could speculate, right? But we don't know. But, he comes from a German background. He was very kind of orderly. I mean, I'm totally speculating. I don't know. But the fact is that clearly marked Trump. Trump has a preference for this sort of...
Is it the idea that like the biological aspects of a woman is disgusting and can't be
That's
talked
exactly
about?
it. And if you look at Trump, he doesn't like the idea of real women, right? He has this kind of plastic ideal, and so the minute his wives don't fit that because suddenly they have big bellies or whatever, he doesn't want to be with them. And so he finds other women who meet that ideal.
Which is what he did with Melania.
All three of them.
Yeah.
He cheated on all three wives when they were pregnant.
Do you find, I mean, was it important for you to find the way that his relationship with women affects the way that his relationship with governance has to work as well?
Well, I think the most important thing we came away from is looking at his relationships with women and, of course, all of us realizing that he is in such a position of power in terms of, enforcing laws related to women, and
it's all about power, right? Like his relationship with women is all about power, as it normally is with predators. So then when it becomes to governance and politics, it again is all about power. It is not in any way about representation or people.
Right.
And it's this attack mode. I was just on my way over here looking at Twitter, and I saw a story that came out this morning where he was, I guess,
attacking the emoluments clause.
Well, no, he was attacking the women astronauts who were in space at the space station, because apparently he was on some remote hookup with them, and he pointed out something that they were the first ones to do a spacewalk, and they had corrected him. And what he did was he went and apparently moved his hand to his head and then put his finger up there. And so that video was caught. So he, in some ways, he was, giving these astronauts, female astronauts in space, the finger. Which, I mean, this is just you put your head to your hand to your head. But again, this is just the type
Not my
of behavior,
finger, just my hand.
the type of behavior that we see on a repeated basis. He always has to be right, and particularly with women. Part of the patterns is he attacks, he calls them by names, and chooses different words, and you hear that over and over again, using dog and so forth to describe.
And you
women.
saw that actually in the military academy.
Yes.
A fellow classmate of his had a date who Trump deemed not pretty enough, and he was calling her a dog and barking at this fellow student about his date. So clearly, I mean, these kinds of insults go way back into his childhood.
Right. Again, he never had to grow up past 13.
He
because
hasn't.
There were plenty of kids who probably did that when they were that age, and it wasn't right then. But I'm sure there were
You
also
learn,
plenty of them
right.
who, by 25, were like, well, I should shape up because no one loves me.
Or you have attitudes that you absorb, and at some point in your life you think, is this really who I want to be, and is this appropriate? And he seems never to have gone through that self-exploration.
Well, when you graduate from the college that you were basically paid to get into, and you are given like a $2 million, $5 million, $20 million loan to just sort of blow on businesses and go bankrupt over and over again, you don't really have to grow up.
Right.
You can just buy the gold toilet
Privilege
and hang out.
is a great protector.
And he's also always relied on people to get him out of trouble, whether it's his lawyers. We saw that with Roy Cohn in the early days. Then, of course, Michael Cohen ended up in jail, and the minute any of these individuals, get in trouble, he completely distances himself from these people.
As soon as it came out that Roy Cohn was sick with AIDS, he distanced himself completely from him and wouldn't talk to him, basically. We have time for a couple questions from the audience. Who has a question?
Hi.
Hi.
It's really intriguing to hear the kind of peculiar ways in which he was raised, but I'm wondering if there was any fear in potentially humanizing him in a way that would end up backfiring towards like the point of the book, and did you go to any lengths to avoid that?
No, the opposite. I wanted to humanize him, and we put in the stories of women who love him.
Yeah.
And I thought, I didn't want to create a caricature, right? I wanted to create a really as full a portrait of a man as possible, because otherwise you can't understand him unless you really look at who he is. And look, there are things not every single thing about him is bad, right? People are more complicated than that. And he, like anybody, is a complex character, and it was very important to me to try and reflect that in the book.
Mostly because he's funny. That's the only thing that makes him a complex character in my book.
No, I mean, look, he does good things for people too, right? There are people who will say he treated me well, he treated me respectfully. Right. I think that's important. I think that, we didn't want to go in with an agenda. We wanted to do a real piece of reporting and show people who he really is. And I think people can make their own judgments about him. And people have different judgments about him, or he wouldn't be president,
I was going to say, I think one of the things that I also came away from, which was very shocking, was one of our reporters, Whitney Clegg, went to one of his rallies in Texas, and wanted her to specifically talk to women who supported Donald Trump. And when you talk to a cross-section of these women at his rallies and so forth, you ask them about the allegations and so forth, and so many of these women believe that these women who made accusations against him put themselves in that position to, end up in an uncomfortable position with him, blaming the victim, which we found repeatedly from a lot of the women who support him, and that was extremely troubling.
Well, that to me, and I'm sorry to respond not with a question,
Sure.
but just like a quick analysis, that to me is not just representative of the patriarchal system, but of the system of individual responsibility that we place on people. There is no collective guilt. There is no sort of collective reckoning for the systems that we create in this country. It is, you are poor, it is your responsibility. You are sexually assaulted, it is your responsibility for having put yourself in that position or not having said no. It's just like his presidency, it's a symptom of greater issues across the country, I think. That's
true.
We have time for one more question.
Great, over here. Hi, so I was wondering that while you're researching the book and discovering the scale of both the amount of victims and the amount of people complicit in it, if there was any particular discovery or thing you learned that gave you particular shock to seeing how large this whole thing was.
Well, I think an incident that we talk about, which most shocked me, was an incident that happened here in New York in Times Square in the early 1980s involving Donald Trump and a porn star and also a teenage girl. And words can't describe when I was told that story, and then spent a couple of months investigating it and breaking it down and talking to other people in the industry at the time to corroborate that particular story. We've heard a lot about him. We've heard, of course, the Stormy Daniels allegations, and then the Karen McDougal allegations, and all the women that came forward in 2016. But this one, to me, in terms of my personal investigation into this, that really struck a nerve, because I have a teenage daughter, and hearing someone tell me that story was very troubling.
And I think the other thing that's a little bit shocking about the book is a lot of these, I went in with journalistic skepticism. I thought, these stories are out there, we know them. And some of the stories in the book many of them you don't. But when you see all of them in one place, all together, it is absolutely staggering and overwhelming, just pulling them all together.
Did you worry, and this goes back to what I was saying a minute ago about sort of collective guilt and the way that we respond to how we treat each other as a society as a whole. One of my fears about the Trump presidency is that we put all of these things on one man. When he's gone, it won't be like this anymore, which it's just not true. Did you ever worry that sort of putting all of those accusations, all of those things together in one book could potentially make it feel like that for readers once again, that this is just solely about this one man? I do think you went to great lengths to not do that, but I was wondering if that was something that was on your mind while you were writing it.
I mean, we try to contextualize it, and it is important to contextualize it and look at systems. It's also important to remember that this man is the president of the United States. Yeah. He is the most visible man in the world. And so this man matters immensely. So, we wanted to do both, but also I don't want to de-emphasize how important it is that it is this man behaving like this. He's not just, some random person.
And he wants another 4 years of, of an administration. So I felt very strongly in the back.
So you guys aren't going to vote for him? Or is that what we were saying?
I felt very strongly in the back of the book to add an appendix that outlined every particular allegation of predatory behavior against him. And they also include in the ones that have been public, it also includes his various statements. So he has a say in the book, although I did go to the White House in the summer with an 18-page memo of 60 allegations and gave White House and Donald Trump an opportunity to respond, and we were met with complete silence.
60 allegations
In the book, overall, yes.
overall in the book. So, and that's total basically what we have right now. That's including the 43 new ones, as well as
And there were other instances of things that came up that I wanted to give him an opportunity to respond on, involving consensual relationships and some other things that we learned. And I requested an interview. I also requested if he did not want to speak, if he would put out a surrogate, whether it be his daughter or even a Kellyanne Conway. But the White House completely shut us down, and there was no response from them.
A lot has been made of his relationship with his daughter, a lot of rumors, a lot of Bill Maher jokes.
Yeah.
What did you find while researching the book?
I think what to me was interesting was that there are several stories of him talking about how hot she is and and that all starts when she is the same age as, or roughly the same age as these young models that he used to go after. So I just think
She was modeling.
And she was modeling. And what's interesting about that is when you read the section in the book about modeling, you see how vulnerable girls in that industry are to older men. So it's interesting that he would let his own daughter go into the same group of women that he had preyed upon, allegedly. So I don't think we talk about any kind of instances of impropriety in between them, but there's certainly a bizarre sexualization of that relationship.
It's just his view of women overall
Right,
extends
they're all
to his
objects.
daughter.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on the book. It's an incredible tale and a necessary, I think, volume of his improprieties and allegations. The book is called All the President's Women, Donald Trump and the Making of a Predator. It's on shelves today. Its authors are Barry Levine and Monique El-Faizy. Let's give them a round of applause for being here, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.